I have another question. Is there ever any value in the inner critic, what the inner critic is saying?
Is there any value in whatever the inner critic says?
Yes, in that way. Just to understand the question, because sometimes a question that often comes up is also related to when is it the inner critic and when is it just like my conscience? Like when is it the inner critic, and when like is sometimes when the inner critic, like let's take an extreme example, right? I go out and then I beat a random person with a stone, and my inner critic says that was not very nice. And you could argue, well, your inner critic is right in this case, right? It's like, that wasn't a very nice thing to do. So maybe you should have listened to your inner critic. I will say, this is where I like to think about the inner critic as you are identified with one part of you, and then there's another part of you that disagrees with that part. Now, there is something right in both parts. Let's take do you have a good example in mind, like where the inner critic might have an example where the inner critic might be worth listening to?
It might stop you doing something stupid.
Like what, for example?
Well, you can criticize a child for maybe stopping putting their hands in the electric plug or something like that.
Yes.
Or warn yourself of doing something that could be dangerous.
Yes, exactly. Now, with the child first, yes, you can tell a child that it's a very bad idea to put their fingers in an electric socket, which you probably should do, but you can do it in many ways. You can explain to the child why it's not a good idea. Of course, if it's a very small child, you can suggest that it puts its finger in something else, like give it a toy, something else to play with. Or you can sort of yell at the child and say, oh, you're so stupid that you don't get this, right? So it's not just about, the inner critic will often deliver a message, but what makes it the inner critic isn't just that it gives you a message, it is that the message comes with a put down. The message comes with a negative evaluation of you. And that negative evaluation isn't actually, often it isn't necessary. So for example, let's say, what could be like a dangerous thing that you want to do? I don't know, you want to climb up on a wall without any safety net, something like this, right? And a voice in you might come and say, maybe you should take precautions. Or an inner voice can come and say, oh, you're also so reckless and you shouldn't be reckless. And with that tone of voice. Do you see? The message is the same. But the second thing is the inner critic. So what defines the inner critic isn't that it gives you helpful inputs. What defines the inner critic is that it gives its inputs with a put down. So one way of disengaging from the inner critic is to exactly to say, what's the kernel of truth in what the inner critic is saying, and how can I take that into account? Sometimes a wonderful metaphorical sort of or visual image is that it's kind of like taking a diamond out of the mouth of a poisonous snake. So usually the inner critic will have some sort of message or kernel of truth that is worth listening to. That's the diamond. And you want to get that diamond. You don't just want to reject it because, you know, you might do something stupid then. You want that diamond. but you want to get it without getting bitten by the poison snake. You want to get it without getting poisoned. Does that clarify a little bit? Cool. Good.